Hello, are you here to debate?
Hi, yeah.
All right, can I just get your name, age, and pronouns, please?
It's Bill, he, him, and 29.
Okay, Bill, what topic do you disagree with on the board?
I can't see the board right now. Is transgender stuff on there at the moment?
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, what specifically?
So, I mean, this is a topic I've kind of thought about for a while, and I've watched your channel for a while as well, and I mean, I really like a lot of the things you have to say, but, I don't know, this is a topic that I kind of feel divided on. I want to understand it from a scientific perspective,
Okay.
but I'm sort of biased and I want to lean towards empathy a little bit. And like I haven't met many transgender people, but I've got some people in my family friends and stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, it doesn't make sense to me I guess in a categorical sense. Like I can say that I don't really see any moral issue with it.
I would hope not, yeah.
But I guess the thing that I disagree with has really always been like that trans men are categorically men and trans women are categorically women.
All right, well, then you need to tell me what a man is.
Well, I usually define man, well, I think there are two different major definitions of man and woman. I think there's the biological indicator version where someone's like, we have a man on the run, send dispatch or whatever to go catch him or something, just like a police example. I don't really care for police, but there's that version. When I think of that, I think of the biological side, but I also know there's like be a man, the social side.
You must be quickly
So
coursing over, yeah.
yeah, when I think of
The big difference here is going to be that like man categorically isn't the biological term we would use, right? In order to speak about the biological, like category wise, we would use male, because male is going to be in reference specifically to the male sexual reproductive side of any species, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Like I know, like the way I describe it is male and female to me seem like in the middle of that biology versus society spectrum, where male and female are strictly biological, and stuff like masculine and feminine are the strictly societal, like completely arbitrary. Being a man doesn't really mean any. They're not saying, hey, have male genitalia. They're saying like, act a certain way in accordance to society's view of how males should act.
So I think the issue is, at least when we're looking at like the categories here, is there isn't anything exclusionary in the category in the category when we're looking at like woman, at least in the way that you're using it. Like if you're saying that like man and woman are two category distinctions that trans people cannot fit into, you would need to have some sort of necessary condition that all women and men who fit into those categories possess, and no one who fits outside of that category possesses. And I've been looking, or at least I've been asking people to give it to me. No one's been able to come up with that necessary condition.
For example, one necessary condition people might say is like X chromosomes for female, right?
Yeah, but we're going to find females who have different variations of chromosomes, XXX, or there are even females who possess XY, pure XY karyotyping, right? And these are people that they're still going to allow into the category of woman. These are people who've been pregnant and given birth. So like, this means that it can't be a necessary condition in that category. So unless there is said condition, now my necessary condition to fit into the category would just be like they have a gender identity that is the opposite of male, essentially. That's all you need, and then that allows every cisgender woman into the category and every transgender woman into the category, while not allowing any cisgender men or transgender men into the category.
Okay. And you would say that for the men side, we would say that it's basically, how would you define men, like man or?
The way I define man is an adult human whose gender identity aligns with their personal schema on the male sex. And then female would just be the opposite with female sex.
Okay.
And what this does is it points out to the fact that gender is not only a social and internal subject or internal critique, but it also points to the fact that gender and sex do have a linking in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, so your definition includes like it's an individual who, I guess, looks and acts in a way that is in the.
Your call has been forwarded.
Was that not Bill? Which one was Bill? Wait, this one might have been Bill.
Your call has been forwarded.
No, Bill, answer the phone.
Your call has been.
No, Bill, answer the phone.
Hi.
Is this Bill?
Yeah.
My bad, Bill. Somebody else was calling, so I went to hang up on them, but I accidentally clicked to hang up on you. My B.
Oh, you're all good. You're all good.
Bang, 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 bang.
You're all.
Continue with what you were saying. Continue with what you were saying.
I'm trying to remember what I was saying, but I think, it's like, so you were saying your definition of man is of the individual who acts and, I guess, behaves and sort of like presents themselves in a way that aligns with society's, like, I guess, like, expectations of what males should do, right?
Not necessarily. It's about somebody whose gender identity, which is just their internal sense of the way it's defined in neuroscience. Gender identity is your internal, your subjective perception of your sex and the way your sex is oriented in your body. So somebody's subjective perception of themselves, basically of their sex, and whether that aligns with their schema. So the way they have personally, their brain, not personally, but the way that their brain has subconsciously categorized this socially constructed category. So if those two things align,
those categories could be masculine and feminine.
Yeah,
right?
Would
you say masculinity and femininity kind of fit into those schemas, right?
Well, no, because you could have a schema like if your schema around women is that they're masculine, you could have a schema of masculine women, right? But it's just that it's just that your gender identity aligns with this thing. So you don't even have to behave any different. Like truly, you will probably behave differently because like that's just what you do when you have a gender identity. Like you try to express yourself if you are free to do so. You try to express yourself in that gender, but it's just about that gender identity aligning with that schema or not. If it aligns with it, so like for instance, my gender identity does not align with my schema on the female sex. Now my schema, because I'm cisgender and I was raised in like a cis heteronormative world, my schemas tend to be biology based in a weird way. Like for me, by the way, not for others. It's for me. Your schema can only tell you how you act. So for me, I'm a man because I'm an adult human male, right? That's all my brain needs to be man. My brain hears that and it's like bing bang. That's all my brain needs. That is not the case for everybody. Some people aren't that, and I can't tell another person, right? Like, hey, you can't be a woman based on my criteria for what I need in myself, or you can't be a man based on my criteria for what I need in myself to be a man, right? That just doesn't even intuitively make sense, right? So it's about, that's why now we can have a common definition. And that's why I think the definition that I use as a common definition is really good. is real. It's a really good definition of when it comes to just giving a blanket, like, this is what this thing is, because it then allows for everyone's own interpretation of it to be valid.
Okay. Well, would you say that like a definition should be, I mean, there's obviously interpretation in every definition to an extent, but like if a definition is essentially this, like a man is kind of what you just want it to be. Does that
no, because we do that with so many
compare?
things. We do that with like a million things related to schemas, by the way. So for instance, how would you define love?
I would say love is, I mean, that's a complicated one, but I think love is like a sort of a selfless desire for the best for someone else or something other than yourself, or not just like a desire for the best outcome, but also like just an appreciation of something for what it is.
Okay. Now let's say we're looking at me and you are both talking about people we're in love with, right? We can have a general definition of love, right? But if I tell you based on what I think you have to do to be in love, can I tell you that you are or are not in love with somebody? Like if you say, hey, I'm in love with this person, can I go, no, because for me, right, I've been told that love means you have to sacrifice, or love means you have to do this. So no, you're not in love with that person. No, I can't do that. We can have a common definition of love, but our schemas around what love is going to be different for both of us. It's the same with like friendship and like friends. We both can have a common understanding.
Clarify what you mean by schema.
Schema is, in fact, I'll read you the definition from my debate glossary, which is, I'm going to put on my link tree today. A schema is a cognitive framework or concept that helps organize and interpret information. Schemas can be about anything, including concepts of gender and sex. So it's just a way for our brain, it's a way that our brain subconsciously categorizes information. So our, like, from the day we're born, from the day we arrive on this planet, right, and blinking stepped into the sun, there was more to see than can ever be seen, and more to do than can ever be done. But basically, that was a Lion King reference, by the way. Basically, schemas are, it's this concept in psychology of how from the minute we're born, our brains are categorizing everything, and it has to, right? We have to be able, if I look at a book, right, my brain has to recall a bunch of information to go, that is a book. And what is some of that information? My brain goes, well, it has pages, it's bound, it's got a story or words inside, and my brain goes, book. We do this for literally everything. It's just the way our brains work. And so
you would say a definition is like a definition versus a schema, they sound very similar then. Like they're both like using descriptive terms to describe definitions
are more to define, to tell us what a concept of something is. Schema is going to be like a list of information on basically how you can identify that concept, kind of. What's a good way to well, I mean, it's like if I was gonna define chair, like the definition of chair might be different than what my schema around chairs are. Like the definition of chair could be like an object you sit on, right? But my schema could be chairs have 4 legs, chairs made of wood, chairs have a back, right? So it's just like, you know, definitions are basically an easier way for us to say what a thing is, as opposed to like schemas.
Your definition of male then would be like you described. You already gave your definition, but your schema, you said, is an adult human male.
Yeah, like my personal schema on man, like what my brain personally sees personally views as man, right? Oftentimes is just like adult human man. But again, that's just because I was raised 30 years in like a cis-normative world, and it's like retraining your brain is different. So like when we're talking about like a definition, right? The definition of man, an adult human whose gender identity aligns with their personal schema on the male sex, is just a very broad I wouldn't even say broad. It's actually pretty detailed. Shout out Katie in the chat for coming up with the definition. But it's a very concrete definition. And then those schemas are going to be different for every person. So those will be, and you might not even know what your schemas are, right? Your schemas are subconscious. We don't even think about it, right? Like, think about it. When you look at a book, you just know that's a book. You don't even think about it. Your brain does all of this it recalls all of this stuff instantaneously. Yeah. And so it's not even like, something you consciously are thinking about.
You see pages, you see a cover, you're subconsciously affirming your schema, but you're not going to look at a book and define it in the moment unless someone asks you.
You know, one of the best, roll with me on this. I might have one of the best ways to think about this. Have you ever watched the TV show Is It Cake?
I've seen clips.
Okay. Let's say I have two things on Is It Cake. One is real, one is cake, and let's say they're a book. If I don't know that either is cake, my brain is still going to instantly recall that they're both books. If it's actually like really good and they look identical, my brain is just going to recall that it's a book. But I could be wrong, because what's on the inside of that cake or what's on the inside of that book, it could be cake.
Okay.
Our schemas, the only thing our schemas can tell us with 100% certainty are what's inside of ourselves. They can't really tell us with 100% certainty what something else is, right? And if we're looking at another person, like I can't tell what's inside that other person, right? I can't tell. Like, that person has to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when people, when I see someone, I guess on the street or whatever, and I see someone who has physical traits that look similar to what males typically look like, that's sort of like the whole, I'm assuming it's a book, but it could be a cake thing.
There you go. Yes, that person Bill. There you go, Bill.
Actually. Okay. All right. So, because I've got like family friends that I would, it's a pretty new thing, new sort of, I guess, situation developing where someone I really closely care about is pretty young, and they're going through a sort of existential crisis about their gender identity. And so I guess that just leaves me with like questions about, obviously they're not, that's their journey. But I guess it just comes down to like, if I were the parent of a kid and that kid is, say, 14 years old, and they're already having these questions, and I know you have a stance on gender affirming care for minors that you're pro. I'm personally not into it for minors. I think there's still a lot of thinking you have to do at that age for who you are, and like what kind of person you want to be, and like what choices you want to make. And while I know there's like transitional health benefits to doing it earlier, pre-puberty, I just don't see it being the wise choice.
So what I will tell you is the current standard of care with gender affirming healthcare is written in a way to make sure that minors who receive this care are actually being diagnosed gender dysphoric. They're actually being, they're accurately being understood as transgender or gender non-conforming, and they are the detransition rate is like on the high end 3%. Like on the high, like it's probably a lot closer to 1, but on the high end can get up to like 3. So the current standards
of transition, do you mean like the mental side or
I mean, when we're talking about medical care. Yeah, when we're talking about medical care, right? It is medical care for transgender people, especially even transgender youth, right? Has gone through rigorous iterations of standards. And one of the things we have to take with us when we're talking about this is when you're a parent, if your child comes to you, the thing you don't do, and I think most people on the left are understanding of this. The thing you don't do is you say to your child, "Oh, you're trans," right? Like, for instance, I had a child tell me the other day, right? "I don't like dresses." Okay. Doesn't make them trans. They just don't like dresses. Yeah. So there could be an underlying cause of, I associate dresses with women and I don't like feeling that way, so I don't like wearing them. You don't affirm but all you do is you don't go, "Well, you must be trans." You go, "Okay, don't wear a dress."
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Don't wear a dress.
And the concerns people have, like, that kids, either in school or on social media, are maybe getting some of what you just described, of people saying to the camera, "You are trans, you are trans," when
if that was if it was the case that was happening, if it was the case that was happening on like an epidemic level, the detransition rate would be through the roof. But the 2015 trans survey, I actually need to see if there's an update with the most recent trans survey. But the 2015 trans survey was one of the most thorough surveys of transgender individuals, like in the country. And in this survey, they specifically asked people, "Hey, have you ever detransitioned? Have you been trans? Have you detransitioned?" And of this, what was it? 8% of people who responded to the survey said, "Yes, at some point I have detransitioned." 62% though of that 8% said that it was a temporary transition, right? It was temporary. Typically we see this because of societal or familial pressure, or lack of funds to pay for transitional care, things like that. So that means when we look at that means when you do the math, it is 3.4% of people who responded to the survey transitioned permanently as of the time of the survey. So again, that on the high end, 3%.
Was that survey dealing with a certain age group?
The trans survey was, I think, just anyone who was trans could respond. Let me look up the methodology real quick. Let me see. Yeah, the trans survey had 27,715 respondents. But I am not finding the 2022 is out. I should probably see. Oh no, it's just the early insights report. I should probably take a look at that, but I don't see a breakdown of that. Like in like an initial Google search. It most likely exists, but I just don't see one in an initial Google search.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the reason I asked was it kind of feels like the prevalence that I'm mostly thinking about, like, the age group probably around like early tweens all the way up to maybe like early 20s or something.
Yeah, but like even when we look at gender care for children, let me pull up this other study real quick. I gotta release my new source document because I have all this.
Respect for how fast you are at pulling this stuff up.
I have a source document, so I just go to it and I go to the section. I just haven't posted my new one yet because it's not organized in any way anyone but me will understand. But if we look at youth, so there was a study. It was called. Pulling it up right here, and I'll put it on the screen for people. I pull this study all the time. It's re-identification with birth registered sex in a Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort. This was published in March of 2024. And at the time it was published, it was like the largest and most thorough study done on desistance, which is desisting from being trans. So it's basically like you identify as trans, you desist out of that. Of this,
it's just a phase versus permanent.
Of the 552 youth referrals that they followed over a period of 6 years, 93.1% of them desisted before they received any drugs prescribed to them, and only 1%, which of this study was two youth, only 1% of youth who were prescribed puberty blockers and or hormones desisted. Nobody else desisted. So again, I hear all the time, and I actually talked about this on my live show on Sunday. I hear all the time people go, well, there's not enough research. There is. The research is there. People just don't look for it.
Yeah.
We have these, we study this stuff all the time. So yeah, there is so much data showing that gender affirming care, when it's done properly, and the way you do it properly is doing it in line with developmental stages of puberty. When done properly, it lowers comorbidities, so such as depression and anxiety and suicidality. It leads to more positive outcomes. In fact, hold on, let me pull up this other study. One last study for you. One last study for you, and then I'll stop just quoting studies on you. I promise. This one is here it is. So this study, which is hormonal therapy and sex reassignment, a systemic review and meta-analysis of quality of life and psychosocial outcomes. What this study found is that they reviewed 28 different peer-reviewed studies about gender-affirming treatment and found that 80% of individuals reported a significant improvement in dysphoria, 78% of individuals reported significant improvement in psychological symptoms, and 72% of individuals reported significant improvement in sexual function. So every time somebody says, I don't believe in gender affirming care, whether it's for minors or adults, they're just not trusting the actual science behind it. Because what the science is telling us is this is something that helps people.
And it sounds like, okay, so the positive outcomes that come from gender affirming care, those are the people who did not desist. Those are the people who went through the whole process and
yes.
did not, back up on that.
Yes.
But I guess I don't really know how the issue of not knowing if they're going to desist and then they get started on the process versus,
typically what you're going to see.
They do intend to finish the whole process and then they do finish the process. Typically
what you're going to see, if we're talking about people under the age of 18, you're typically going to see female feminization. So feminization medical care, right? Feminization medical care. Typically, you're not going to see many long-term or permanent side effects from if someone detransitions. Masculinizing medical care, you probably will, because one of the things about the human body is when your voice gets lower, it doesn't all of a sudden get higher again, right? There might be some fluctuations, but typically part of masculinizing. But the problem is those changes are what we want. So when I say we, I mean the people who are undergoing this treatment. So somebody who goes through masculinizing hormones, they want their voice to get deeper. They want their jaw to get more defined. They want their now obviously there can be conversations about surgical guidelines. Totally fine with that. Per the current standards, 18 is typical of bottom surgery, right? And I'm totally fine with there being some standards around surgical guidelines. I think we should have standards around surgical guidelines for everything. Right? I don't think 16-year-olds should be able to get boob jobs, but we allow that in the country, right? But if we're just saying, hey, there's a risk of side effects, there's a risk of permanent change to things, there's just every medical treatment on the planet has those risks. But I don't see hardly any of them with a regret rate as low as the regret rate is for gender affirming care.
So usually if you're talking, say you're a parent and you're talking to your kid, if they're already saying, I want to go through gender affirming care, and I don't really know how, again, totally, out of my depth here in terms of what I could expect if that conversation ever came up. But would it, I guess, if they are what I would do, what you should do, much,
you should never just, there's nothing a child will say that you should in terms of this, you should never just be let's go do whatever you want to do. No, if they're because there are the kid could have seen like, oh, one of my favorite influencers got gender affirming care and they were way happier. That's what I want. We don't know that this is the method that will work for you. We don't know. Gender affirming care is hyper individualized. We don't know which treatment path is best for you. We don't know any of that. So what I would do is if a child came to me and said, I am trans, I want to start medically transitioning. I'd say, cool, I support you. Let's get you into therapy. Let's get you to an endocrinologist. Let's get you to your doctor. And let's see over the course, typically, if they're not diagnosed gender dysphoria, they have to go, like, it takes like 6 months to get the diagnosis and 6 months of mental health care to get that diagnosis. I would say, let's get you diagnosed with gender dysphoria, because it may be the case that social transitioning is enough for you. We don't know any of this until that's why it has to be individualized. So I think people think that gender affirming care is going to be the same for every person. It's not. What works for someone might not. There are people who found that social transitioning is all they need. There are people who found that they just might need top surgery and no bottom surgery. There are people who find that they have to go through the full effects of medical transitioning to feel a level of gender euphoria. Let it be individualized. Don't force anything on anybody. Don't deny anything from anybody. Let the medical professionals help guide you to the individual plan that will work best for your child.
Okay. So in summary, don't necessarily take what they say and run with it either direction. Don't like say, shut up, you're crazy, you've been brainwashed, blah, blah, blah. Or, the other way, we're like, okay, we're going to take you into the hospital. We're going to get this all done right now. So you want to get therapy is the first step. And then after that, if it continues, whatever, you had a word for it a while ago, but it was persistence.
Yeah, the therapists specifically look for three things when they're looking at whether or not you have gender dysphoria. If you are gender incongruent and you say my gender identity does not align with my sex, they need to see that you're persistent in this, you're consistent with this, and you're insistent on this. So what
is consistent versus persistent?
So persistent is that you are pushing for this. Consistent just means that you are consistently saying the same things or things similar. And then insistence is you are insistent on this is what I am. So it's that you're pushing, because if you're not pushing for the care, we're not giving you the care. So you're pushing for the care.
Yeah.
You're consistently. I should put these in the glossary. You're pushing for the care. You're consistent in your identity, and you're insistent that this is who you are.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's pretty good. Yeah, thank you. I don't really know if I have much more to say, so I guess, I'm working on trying to make this work, because I studied biology, and so I'm for a while there, I was looking at it live and let live. I'll respect you if you want me to refer you as something else, but in my mind, it just kind of feels bitter for me to say, I'll grant you this courtesy, but in my mind, I don't see you for what you say you are. And I guess I'm trying to make that work so that I'm not disingenuous. So thank you for this. This is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give you real quick, just because I think it will just be a good way to touch up the I want to give you examples of each of the consistent, persistent, and insistence. So an example for consistency is a child who constantly says, I'm a girl, every time the topic comes up across months and years. For persistence, an example is a teen who identified as a different gender at 7 and still holds that identity years later. Insistence is a child corrects people who use the wrong pronouns and insists, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, repeatedly and firmly. Those are just examples of those three things.
And so in the therapy phase, I'm wondering, if they're kind of feeling like they're not being affirmed, you say they check all three categories, but they're still not getting care because maybe they're young, and so their parents are hey, we support you, but also we think you're too young. Like, what would you think the best approach there is, other than, the parents need to change their minds?
Well, it just depends on a few things. Like if we're specifically talking about medical affirming care, right? There is an age.
I'm pretty much exclusively talking medical.
There is an age that's too young, and that would be prior to puberty, right? Prior to puberty, it's too young, right? Maybe not. Yeah. It's not that it's too young. It's that you haven't reached the developmental age that you need medical affirming care. Like prepubescent kids don't need puberty blockers. They're not producing the hormones. Yeah. They don't need HRT. They're not producing, like, once you hit puberty, then if we're just talking about like what gives better benefit to the child overall, it is because you have the thing that people don't think about is when you go through, like, let's say I have a child, and that child is a trans girl, and she is going through male puberty. If her parents allow her to go through the entirety of male puberty, and we know that, and it is the case that this child is severely gender dysphoric, right? What's going to happen is their body is going to change to develop male characteristics, which is going to exacerbate that gender dysphoria. It's going to, and it could exacerbate it a little bit. It could exacerbate a lot of it. And the other issue you run into is that now that you have gone through male puberty, it's going to be way more expensive and require more procedures to do what would have happened to your body naturally had you just taken feminizing hormones. Yeah. Right? Okay. Now you might need facial feminization surgery. You might need vocal feminization surgery. You might need breast augmentation, things that you might have not needed had your body your body gone through feminizing puberty.
Okay. Because the balance I'm seeing that's hard for me to work out is giving them a more efficient care that you described, like during the puberty process, versus saying, you're going through puberty, you're still basically a child. I don't think you should be doing any medical stuff to your body, because you could desist, like we described. So that's what I'm not really sure about, is like, how do we sort of, you have a kid that is in the early phases of that dysphoria they're questioning. I guess my question is, like, how much do you affirm in the early phases? Because if you affirm it and then they were going to desist, but now they're not because you've been affirming it, how does that work?
Well, we don't have any evidence in like any of the research that affirming somebody's gender is going to make them like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's gonna exacerbate their dysphoria. It can actually have the exact opposite effect, right? So if you have a child who you have a young adolescent, who's like whatever age they are, and they're like, I'm a girl. I know that I was born a boy, but I'm a girl, and you socially affirm them. Like you go full tilt, like, okay, whatever you need, we can worry about the medical stuff later, but whatever you need socially, I've got you. There is a chance that you affirming them socially is all that they need. You don't know until you do it, right? But what the research shows is that positive outcomes come from affirmation and negative outcomes come from, I guess conversion is what I would call the opposite of affirmation.
Like trying to convince them that they're deluded in a way.
Yeah.
Like gaslighting, essentially. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. All right. I think that's all I really have to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being open.
Yeah, no, it's kind of entertaining listening to the call sometimes and hearing some fuck shit.
All right. Well, you have a good rest of your day, Bill.
All right. You too. Bye.
Have a good one. What's up, everybody? Thanks for watching this video. And I want to give a special shout out to my YouTube members. Their names are on the side. Membership starts at $2.99 a month, and you get early access to videos, exclusive members-only videos, and access to the Red Mirror Media Discord server. Thank you again to my members, and thanks for watching.